All right, here's the clicker. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Why don't I vamp for a second while the slides come on? So nobody here is brand marketing. I couldn't see anybody in the back. So this is all like a very foreign world to you guys. OK, good. So can I get the notes up? Thank you. Good. So I was really worried that I was going to be the last guy before lunch. So I thought I really need to make this presentation interesting. So I actually used one of those AI image generators. Like, you've heard of like DALL-E or Midjourney, the other ones. I used it to make almost all the visuals in this presentation. And I use it to varying degrees of success. And there's some really cool visuals, and there's some that are pretty horrific. And we'll just go along for the ride. So the first thing I actually did is I went to the AI, and I gave it a prompt, and basically asked it to develop my slides for me. And this is what it gave me. This was the prompt I gave it. And this was the output. So it's just kind of gobbledygook, but the second AI learns buzzwords, I think we're all out of a job. OK, so the first thing I want to tell you about is there's going to be a lot of weird AI imagery in this talk. Second thing, I want to give you a sense of the problem I'm going to talk about and the solutions that I'm going to provide. So the problem is when brand and PMM are misaligned. And I'm using brand as shorthand for creative. Obviously, brand is a little bit more of a broader scope than that, but I'm going to keep saying brand because that's how I think of the world. So has anyone ever experienced this where PMM just does not see eye to eye with brand? Show of hands? That's quite a few. And is that fun? No. OK, so here's AI's visualization of when brand and PMM are misaligned. OK, thank you, AI. So I come from B2B SaaS. So most of my experience is in B2B SaaS world, small, mid-sized, large companies. So I'm going to have most of my conversation focused in that context. So what does it mean in that world when the creative doesn't match the strategy or the vision or the business needs? Well, I mean, most obviously, the creative doesn't convert. It does convert, but it attracts the wrong kind of leads. Or when the leads get on the phone, the sales scripts don't land. Or the sales team is really embarrassed by the creative and they won't use it, and so there goes that distribution channel. If the sales slows down, they'll blame marketing, of course. And then your boss will call you into her office and rip you a new one. And this is an AI's visualization of that moment. What I love most about this is that the AI is actually placing a fake stock photography watermark over the photos. OK, so part 2A, the problem that we're here to talk about, and part 2B, the solution. This is not generated by AI. Click. There we go. That's the right one. OK, so what I'm going to talk about today are really these 4 solutions. I'm actually a big fan of Kurt Vonnegut. Anybody else read Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-Five? He has this really interesting style where he starts out the book, and in the first chapter or 2, he really lays out the whole plot, beginning, middle, and end. You know what's going to happen in the entire book, and you read it anyway because the journey is so delightful. So I think that by giving you this up front, hopefully the journey is going to be fun and interesting for you, and also we'll double-click and triple-click into some of these things and really bring it to life, I hope. And if not, at least AI will be delightful in and of its own. So I asked AI to visualize Kurt Vonnegut looking deep into your soul. And that's actually pretty good. And then I asked Kurt Vonnegut to visualize I asked AI to visualize Kurt Vonnegut looking deep into your soul and recognizing your imposter syndrome. And Kurt looked away. I mean, perfect. OK, so I told you I was going to do 3 things up front, or maybe I didn't, but I meant to. First thing was AI. Second thing was problem solution. Third thing should have been the first thing. I'm going to introduce myself. And what I did, of course, is ask AI to visualize what I look like. So I fed it a prompt, and this is what it came up with. That's what I gave it to imagine. And that was the first result it gave. This is the second result, and I love Da Viper. I might just adopt that. And this one was the third one. So a little scary. OK, so I'm Dave Prager. I run brand and product marketing at Front, which makes B2B customer communication software. My background is actually relevant to both sides of those equations. I started my career in advertising agencies as a copywriter, spent about 8 years working my way through, no, 12 years, working at agencies in New York, in New Delhi, in Singapore, and in Denver before coming out to Silicon Valley in 2012, where I went client side, starting as a content person, eventually running corporate marketing, comms, things like that. So underneath me was brand, was design, was content, really any expression of the messaging in these companies came through me. I left in 2016 and went to a startup where it was a 2-person startup when I left, and it was 100, or when I joined, 110 person when I left. And I ran all of marketing there. And that gave me kind of this broad perspective on what's in the world of marketing much beyond communication. And so now I'm at Front, where I run half of marketing. I run the brand and the PMM half. And so this is my domain today. And it's kind of unusual for all of these areas to report up to the same person. Let me tell you why it makes sense for Front, and then I'll abstract out to some lessons that I have for the rest of you. So we're B2B SaaS competing with Zendesk. Actually, I'm not going to say too much about it because they said, do you sell to PMMs as part of your buying group? And I said no. Otherwise, they would have made me sponsor. So don't go out and check out my software. But here's our situation. We're moving up market. And if anyone else has been in that situation, you know that trying to go from being good at selling to small businesses to being just as good to selling to medium and large-sized businesses is not easy. You have to, rethink your positioning, you have to rethink your messaging, you have to rethink how marketing works with the sales team. The buying cycles get longer, the buying groups get larger. Marketing has to not just pass leads, but really get involved in the entire life cycle of the lead. All of these things are happening, and Front wanted to move fast, and so we wanted to make sure that as the strategy evolved, the expression, the creative, evolved in unison. But the team, when I joined, there was a great brand team, a small PMM team. The whole marketing team was really cohesive. They worked together really well, but they were completely misaligned from a strategic standpoint. And what happened is basically the brand team would get an idea, they'd run off, they'd come back $300,000 later with a great set of videos or some great creative expression, but it wasn't born of strategy and it didn't arrive with a distribution plan. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today comes directly from this experience, but also a little bit abstract as well, because I want to make sure that it's kind of universally relevant, or as much as it can be. So let's just kind of break down these problems. So the first issue at a high abstract level is that the creative is misaligned with the strategy. And so when you dig into this, you start to think, okay, the brand team, they're responsible for the creative. The PMM is responsible for the strategy, but they're developed in isolation. So let me digress for a second and come back to this. So I mentioned to you I spent 11 years in the ad agency world. I worked in 4 global cities in 3 countries, and no matter what ad agency I worked at, there was always the same structure. There was an account manager, and a copywriter, and an art director. And everywhere I went, there was any creative assignment had those 3 people. The account manager represented strategy, the copywriter represented the words, and the art director represented visual. The important thing was each one of these people was empowered to say yes and to say no. And so there was this incredible give and take, this incredible tension, but throughout the duration of any project, those 3 people were involved. And what that meant is that everyone representing their own interest eventually came to alignment. And so that was a strategy that we've deployed here in Front. Over there in front. We have a pod structure for creative, and we try to do all our creative through this pod structure, where the PMM, representing the strategy, engages content and design, starting at the brief, actually starting with the crafting of the brief, to make sure that everyone's aligned strategically, and then works throughout the project all the way through to make sure that it all ends up with what you want. And I think that's, it works in every ad agency. So there's no reason why it can't work in anywhere, in any company. And I definitely recommend it. And in bigger companies where it's not so easy to get those resources, you have to be a little bit more proactive. You have to try to get in front of the people who are going to be working on your creative. Sometimes it goes to a pool, the brand services team, and that's really hard to deal with. But you got to just be proactive. You have to really try to make that connection with people, and that's how you get that good work to happen. So here, of course, is an AI's visualization of a team of 3 working together really well. That's the first one. That's the second one. And this is probably one of my favorites. The more you look at that handshake, the weirder it gets. OK, so let's go back to the premise, and let's take a different path. The brand team, when the creative, so the brand team looks at creative, and they see that as the final product. The PMM team sees a creative as a larger milestone, or the milestone in the larger process. And I think this is actually a pretty important insight. And this also kind of stems from the ad agency world. A lot of creatives come out of the agency world, and they're trained to look at the creative product as their actual product, as the artifact, because that's what they get judged on, that's what they get hired for when they go for jobs. They submit a portfolio full of creative, and they start to think of it as the thing. And even client side, oftentimes the involvement of the creative ends when the thing is passed over. And so they start to get really, really focused on making the best creative, and they start to look at the strategy almost as an impediment to creative. And coming from the brand side, there's been plenty of times where a strategy's come to me, and I've looked at it and tossed it out the window because it was, too many words, it didn't make sense, it wouldn't emotionally resonate. I wanted to make good creative, good content, so we would do it a different way. And of course, that sets up all sorts of tension. The PMM team is different. So PMMs recognize their role in the company. Our role is basically a pass-through. Stuff comes from product, our job is to bring it to the market, and then the market tells us stuff, and our job is to bring it back to product. That's kind of it in a nutshell. And I'm oversimplifying, but that's kind of it. But either way, we know we're a conduit. We know we're a part of the process. And we also know that the creative is a part of the process. We look at the creative. It's not the creative as the end goal. The creative is a point in time. That's something that's going to be distributed through other teams, that's going to cause some action, that's going to cause some interest, that's going to do all sorts of things. So once you start to recognize that the brand team really does see their involvement ending and beginning and ending at the point of the creative, you can start to approach things differently. This might be running out of batteries, but I don't know. OK, so the brand team sees a creative as the endpoint. The PMM views it as the midpoint. So what you got to do, and this is actually something you can do even in the bigger companies, although obviously the smaller your company is, the better. You want to get them thinking beyond the creative delivery. And so what I did up front is engage the brand team in building the distribution plan. And I've really hammered home the mantra that you can't just have creative, you have to have a distribution plan that goes alongside it. And I'm going to show you an example of a distribution plan that we've built. This chart is hard to follow, and it'll build slowly over time, and it'll build 2 or 3 times while I'm talking, and hopefully you'll get the sense of it. What this does is we start with the primary content. We sit all the strategy people, all the creative people in a room, and we say, OK, we're going to start. So this is for a thought leadership campaign. We did a bunch of research. We got a bunch of findings. We're going to put it out through PR. We're going to put it out through demand gen channels. People come to our report. They get interested. They're going to sign up for a better asset. And then we'll, of course, engage them, nurture them, and eventually land them. We went to the creative team and said, OK, let's start with the primary asset, the thing that's going to be the most unique, hardest thing to develop. It's going to contain all the content. Everything else is derived from it. So that was the press kit, which is basically our way of saying the report that we're going to send out to the press that's going to get people interested. And almost everything else is going to be derived from that, with the exception of that mid-funnel asset, which is the thing to entice them to fill out the form. And then we went step by step. OK, what is the distribution channel? Well, earned media is one, so we're going to need a press release. We have demand gen, which means we're going to need to adapt these into ads. We have social, which means we're going to have to take these infographics and adapt them into little snackable things that our social team can pass on, and on and on and on. Oh, we're going to need a landing page. Well, what's the landing page going to need? It's going to need the form. It's going to need this and that. Well, we're going to need a nurture campaign. We're going to need a sales script for the SDs when that lead calls up. So taking them step by step through this distribution plan and helping them think beyond the life cycle that they're normally thinking actually got the creatives really engaged. And I can measure that engagement by the fact that the content person in charge of this volunteered to be the QB of this campaign that you're seeing here. I've never seen a content person raise their hand and say, I want to run this end to end. And I think it's because they got so bought in at the beginning that they're seeing the success. OK, let's go back again. And let's talk about it from a different perspective. So the creative is going to derive from the brand positioning, while the product marketers generally look at the product positioning. And what that means, if the work comes out misaligned, is that the two aren't really aligned from each other. And so the solution is to create a bridge between brand positioning and product positioning. So let me define these two terms, and then I'll define how we build a bridge. Product positioning, you guys all know, is basically the space you carve out for the product relative to the competitors, how you position it against the competitors. Brand positioning is a little bit different. It's the space you carve out in the mind of the customer, what you want them to think of or feel when they think of your brand. The easiest way to imagine this is Southwest Airlines. Their product positioning is inexpensive and flexible. Their brand positioning is joy and love. And they do a good job of expressing both of those things. Now, if you were to give the creative the opportunity, they would gravitate to the brand positioning because it's just visceral, it's emotional by design. It's something that's really easy to build creative off of, and they go wild on it. And they really ignore product positioning. It's got that formulaic structure. I mean, they don't want to ignore it, but they end up ignoring. It's got that formal structure. It's got so many words that the CMO made you jam in there. There's all these things that make it kind of hard for creatives to take and distill. And so the way we created this bridge is to do what we call brand opinions. And let me explain what I mean. So here's Front's product positioning and our brand positioning. So our product positioning is that we're the communication software for companies that differentiate on the strength of customer relationships. And I don't need to go into our space, but suffice it to say, if you put on like a chart, you could see Front space where nobody else plays, and you can see all the other competitors mapped alongside it. Our brand positioning is much more emotional. We're the champion for the human touch in business relationships. And so we sat down with the PMMs and the brand team, creative and strategy, sat down to map out what we call brand opinions, which is what do we stand for as a company or as a product? If we were in a bar and we're Front, what are we going to pound on the bar about? What are the things that we really, really strongly care about? Because that's where you're going to map and align positioning, the two kinds of positioning, into something that the creatives can run with, but you as a product marketer can also run with. So for example, our overarching brand opinion is that relationships drive business success more than any other factor. So we need to express this in our creative. The brand positioning is how you should see us, but the brand opinion is how we should talk to you. And it bridges the gap. And I'll show you some examples in a second. But that one brand opinion doesn't always do it, so we have to have supporting opinions. I'm not going to go through all of these. But suffice it to say, you think through like, well, what is a trend that's happening? What's our opinion on that trend? What are our competitors doing? What features are they launching? What's our opinion on that? We end up having commentary, like our social team will say, wow, Delta Airlines just said something about how they care about the human touch too. We should comment on that. We should say, yes, we support them, or no, they're faking it, whatever it might be. But you get all these supporting opinions that let you really build out your library of creative and your library of strategy and really make it simple for your creative to be aligned with the strategy. So here's kind of a boring example, but it's no less salient. So we have a belief that you see on the left, and we had to write some release notes about a new feature. And so when we gave the brief to the writer, we made sure that we said, this is the brand opinion that this feature aligns to. And by the way, brand opinions don't just guide creative, they actually guide the product. Because if we're opinionated about what we believe the market wants or what the market should want or how it should behave, then we're going to launch a certain set of features and not other features. So this is the release notes that came out, and you can see not just what I highlighted, but kind of throughout, there's a sense of character, there's a sense of perspective, there's an opinion associated with it that makes it interesting to read, that even in this little boring touch point reinforces your brand, but still stays on strategy. Let me give you a more interesting example. So this is our brand campaign that we came out with a couple months ago. And you can see there's 4 things you should watch for as you watch this. You should watch for our product positioning, which is that we're for businesses that differentiate on customer relationships. Our brand positioning, that we're the champion for the human touch. Our overarching brand opinion, and this supporting opinion. And you should be able to see all 4 of these in this 30-second video.
Just replied to 1,000 customer emails, Gene.
Nice work, Larry. Have some coffee.
I didn't even read them, Gene.
Nice work, Larry. Have some coffee.
I didn't write my responses either, Gene.
Nice work, Larry. Have some coffee.
I use the same template for all of them, Gene.
Nice work, Larry. Have some coffee.
Cool. So brand opinions, I'm a big fan of them, and I encourage all of you guys to think about it. Again, in the big companies, you might not be able to formally say these are going to be SAP's brand opinions, but you can certainly work with your creatives on a case-by-case basis to understand like what you actually want to express emotionally in the work that you're asking for. You can kind of tease your way into brand opinions without making it like a whole formal exercise. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is kind of a bonus one, doesn't really fit the structure I laid out earlier, but this is what happens when brand and PMM can't align on resourcing or prioritization. And this is something that we see probably everywhere, certainly everywhere I've ever been. And the insight isn't really much of an insight. They don't know what's important to each other. They don't really agree on what's important to the business. And so what we do at Front is we actually force the alignment. And what that means specifically is we make mandatory collaborative review sessions of each other's quarterly strategies. Everybody hates this. It's painful. You get into a room, let's say there's 5 leaders. For me, it's content, PR, brand, product marketing, core product marketing, audience product marketing, and customer marketing. We all get in a room. Every one of us has a document, 2 or 3 pages, 20 minutes, 30 minutes each. You read it silently, you comment on it, and then you discuss. And it's painful, and it takes forever, and it's kind of awkward because you don't want to say things that your other colleagues don't like. But what ends up happening is, for example, the brand team, they start to know what's coming. And they start to really understand what's important to the business in a way they might not know if they're just looking at their inbox with projects coming up, one by one. The product marketing team really understands what brand cares about, and you can strategically align some projects to what they care about, or you can realize that they care about the wrong thing and do some course correction. And at the end, what happens is that you have much better alignment, and even though you spent that time up front that was so painful, the quarter is so much smoother because you did this. So I'm going to show you AI's visualization of 2 business people angrily reviewing each other's strategies. So that's the first one that came out with. That's the second one. It kept on spitting out really good ones, so I'm going to show you a couple more. This is the third one. This is the fourth one. 2 more. This one was almost like a rap battle in my mind, like a rap battle about strategies. And then this one, to me, was Professor X making farting sounds at Abraham Lincoln. So let me recap. We talked about these 4 solutions to help solve this problem of misalignment. Now, I'm lucky. I'm in a position where brand and PMM both report to me, and I can really make sure these things happen. Not everybody's in that position. And so if you're not in that position, if you're seeing that misalignment, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, do my colleagues on the other side see the same misalignment? And you got to start from that point of agreement. Yes, we disagree. And there's actually probably a whole strategy, a whole presentation I can make about how to get people you disagree with to at least see your point of view and start to come together. That's something for another day, and I'm kind of waiting for the next gen AI to write that one for me. It's a lot easier than writing it myself. So one last AI to show you, and then I'm out of here. I asked AI to visualize the perfect ending to this speech. I imagined people lifting me up on their shoulders. I imagined my fantasy ending, and I did not rig this. This is what AI gave me. It gave me like much better fantasy than anything I could ever imagine. A sea of bald men cheering me on. Cool, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Questions for Dave? We'll bring Mike to you. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Learned a lot. In one of your slides, you were mentioning about the brand positioning and the product positioning, and coming together to make a brand opinion. While it sounds beautiful, what I wanted to know is what exactly the process entailed. PMM does their own research to build their value proposition.
Yeah.
Brand team will have their own research. So how exactly you executed in real time? Do you had one research team, or how exactly both the teams came together and built this opinions hold?
Yeah, so the process we used wasn't as scientific as the one you're suggesting because we were a 400-person company and our research team isn't that big. But we looked at trends that were in the market. We looked at things our competitors were doing. We looked at our own things the choices we were making, and we spoke to leaders separately, brand and PMM, to get a sense of why we're doing these things. So if we're launching, let's say, some sort of enhanced chat functionality, and we're deliberately not putting in some sort of AI chatbot, why? What is it that we believe about that our customers want so strongly that we're going to align our product roadmap to that? And so then all these ideas would start to flow. Or we would look at trends in the market. Well, a lot of companies are starting to talk about AI chatbots, to use that example again. What is our opinion as a company? We ask the CEO, we ask leadership, what is the opinion of the company? And having done all that groundwork, we come together as a group and we start to lay out, well, what is it that we really care about? What have we heard? What have we heard from the CEO or the product marketing manager or the salespeople that resonates or that we really strongly believe or we're making decisions against? Put them all kind of on the table, and we start to look for patterns. Eventually, the patterns emerge, and eventually, once you see the patterns, you can kind of find that overarching thing. Now, we could have gone out and focus grouped it and tested it. Kind of one of the benefits and curses of being a smaller company is we don't have those resources, so we go with our gut. In the case of my company, we're actually working with the CEO on this, so we could get that final buy-in. Yes, this is what we actually believe. There'll be different methods of actually selling it through in different organizations, but that's kind of the process we took.
Hey there. I've worked in a couple of organizations where there's been a product marketing function, but brand wasn't centralized. Like growth had their own opinion about what brand was, and community or content had their own opinion of what brand was. What would you recommend when there isn't a single source of brand truth to align to?
So I'll have another follow-up question for you, though, because in that scenario, was there like a centralized owner of brand, or there just a bunch of different resources? So I think that's the problem. Like that's a bigger than PMM problem. That's a structurally we don't value brand, we don't value creative, and we're just going to let everyone do whatever they want. And in that scenario, good luck.
Thank you so much. I feel like this is awesome, and I really want you to become a guest speaker at my company in the future. Anyway, so back to
you're
my
done.
question.
Okay, that's good. No, thank you.
You mentioned both product positioning and brand positioning.
Sure.
And you gave a lot of examples of how different they are. So I'm curious, should we be intentional when we create these two positioning that they should be different? In my mind, I'm thinking maybe can be the same. So I'm curious on your perspective of how can we purposely design them differently?
Yeah, good question. And I honestly wrestled with that a lot. I couldn't really figure out the difference between product and brand positioning for a long time. And it finally clicked to me when we were actually working on the first set of opinions that I worked on. So product positioning is relative to the competitors in the market. So Southwest Airlines, to use that example again, is cheap. And that's a relative term, relative to United, relative to the other people. And they also have flexibility that's maybe relative to JetBlue or Spirit or whoever they might be, who might also be cheap. But that is inherently a reaction to the market and to what's in the market. The brand positioning is what you want people to think of you. So maybe another way to put it is, me, Dave, my product positioning is I'm going to position myself as the expert of this bridge across product and brand. But my brand positioning is I'll position myself as this funny, guy who happens to maybe have some insight here and there between the jokes. Whatever it might be, you're going to think about me one way, but you're going to see me relative to the other speakers you have to choose from. That's my product positioning and my brand. Does that kind of enlighten a little bit?
Yeah,
Cool.
what's the difference between the overarching brand versus your value proposition hierarchy?
The overarching brand position and the supporting opinions?
Right.
So the supporting positions are more situational. So for example, internal collaboration should be invisible to your customers. That's situational for us against like a Zendesk, where Zendesk, if you write to a company that uses Zendesk, you'll get something back that says you're number 423 in the queue, and someone will get to you shortly. And they're seeing all of like this, basically the database in action. They realize they're part of a database, and they don't feel like they're human. Our opinion and the way we design our product is that you should never know that behind the scenes you're being treated and routed and triaged and prioritized. You should just think that you're feeling important. And so that's a reaction to when we see, like in a sales situation, if you're going up against Zendesk, well, do you really want your customers to know how you collaborate? Do you really want your customers to know how you triage? You shouldn't, because that's just noise, distracts from the relationship, from the conversation. That's one example. So the supporting opinions are going to be situational, but they all should be linked by that theme, which is that overarching theme.
Okay. Hi. Really love the AI images, by the way. Totally gonna steal the PMM fighting with brand. So thank you for that.
You bet.
So if you could go back to that slide, I was actually gonna ask about the brand opinion.
Okay, cool.
So it looks much easier than it probably seems. Could you maybe walk us through a little bit on how you came up with the overarching brand opinion? And my second part of my question is, typically in PMM, as you know, we have our messaging house or messaging framework. Do you have an example of what the template would look like when you do combine it with brand?
Right. Okay, so starting off with how did we come up with the idea of relationships drive business success more than any other factor? That's where it really pays to work with the creatives, because they're really good at synthesizing all the information that they see and coming up with a really creative way to say it. This is the kind of thing where once it was said, we realized, well, yes, this is why we're in business. This is why we're making product decisions. This is why we're doing certain things the way we do, because we as a company really believe in these relationships. I don't know if I could give you a formula for coming up with something like that. It's just being able to distill a bunch of stuff into a very simple framework is kind of in and of itself a skill that is not easily taught, I'd say. And the second question, the framework, we do have messaging houses. They serve a bit of a different purpose. Our brand opinions document is really kind of very similar to what you see here. It's longer. It has more direction on how you use it, and it kind of reinforces the idea that every time you give a creative brief, there should be an opinion associated with it. But in terms of how you actually leverage this as an artifact, it's more or less what you see here.
Thanks, Dave.
You bet.
Really, really great presentation, and you have the luxury of forcing the alignment. Many places we don't. And in that case, I'll just go back to the previous session that we had, is just reach out to other organizations, kind of promote yourself, keep your relationship hydrated. I think that makes a lot of sense, where you could work on these alignments. So thanks again. A round of applause for Dave.